Okay, so I'm going to start a project in Photoshop Fix. Now I have Photoshop Sketch, which is very much like Adobe Draw, but uses a lot of transparency effects and would work with a stylus on your tablet quite nicely. It creates raster effects to create artwork from scratch that is raster based to use in Photoshop. So painting is what it does, like an airbrush, for example. So I did vector drawing. That's what Photoshop Sketch is. Photoshop Mix is the feature in Photoshop that would have selection tools and the ability to knock out a background and move in a new background. So that's built in, and that's really for comping and putting together new pictures or so as necessary. I'm going to use Photoshop Fix because it just seems really professional and has all the restoration features from Photoshop built into it, and I think that's pretty exciting. So I'm going to use this to edit a picture that I have in my library here on my iPad and create a Photoshop Fix project. There's some example projects here. These are just part of the software, but I'm going to start a new project by opening a file right here. And of course I'm choosing files from my iPad, so this is my iPad options, and I'm going to go here to the Birds of Canada project where I've got this photograph to work with. Okay. Now I've got a cropping option, but I'm just going to jump right ahead from the left side to adjust. And I want to make some adjustments here. So exposure will allow me to keep some highlights but make the picture look a little darker in the shadows, which I really like having an option for. Contrast will allow me to enhance the colors quite a bit and have even better shadows and highlights. So more of a scoop here for more shadows and highlights. Warmth, absolutely my favorite. I can put it warmer, which is sort of a yellow balance, but I think pictures look really realistic when you remove the yellow and add in a bit of blue, so I'm going for a bit of a color balance here. There's saturation options to saturate or add more color in, or completely desaturate and have no colors, so I'm just going to go for a little bit of saturation or so. I'm happy with the shadows and highlights, so I'll leave them as they are, and I'll press the check mark to finish the adjustments, which was really straightforward and really easy there. There's a liquefy option to move things around and sort of give it a little bit of a flowing option. I can pull the chin out longer and features like that we do in Photoshop. But I'm going to jump ahead to the famous healing tools that Photoshop has that they've thrown right in here. The spot healing, all these white dots I want to get rid of. Now this may take a second on my iPad, but I'm adjusting the brush size here a little bit. I'm going to go maybe up to about 25 pixels. I'm 24.5, that's close enough. I'm going to tap on these white dots that I want to get rid of. Now again, I didn't quite tap on the first one perfectly, so I do have an option to do an undo and undo the settings as I'm working here and try and tap a little better on these items. And once I've highlighted the areas that I would like to heal, then it's a matter of pressing the check mark and allowing the healing to work as well. Just one at a time, it'll go through each of those dots and heal the area below it. Healing is exactly like it is in Photoshop, where it uses the content aware settings to go through and just simply replace the things you don't want with textures and features that you do want from just made up new features that are close by. So this picture is really coming along. It has a slightly better picture, of course. It's quite enhanced, as you can see. So just give it a second to run and finish this filter. Now when I'm done, I'm just going to save this as a brand new graphic on my camera roll to work with. So in the upper left corner, I'm pressing the triangle saying that I'm finished editing this item, and that will take me to a projects page where I'll see the original projects that they had as examples, but it just shows that this is one of the projects I'm working with. It's built into, and they're just saved as part of my copy of Photoshop Fix. I can come back to it any time. Notice I have a trash can to delete it. I can also duplicate it with the duplicate symbol that's down there as well. Now I could also rename it something other than project, and when I click on it I can continue editing it. The idea is I did want to save a copy, if you recall. So I'm editing it again, as you can see. Now in the upper corner, right here, upper right corner, I'm going to choose an option that allows me to send this to Photoshop to save it on my desktop computer to continue working with it. I can save it to my CC library, or I can save it, of course, which it's currently doing. I'm saving it to my CC library, or of course I have an option to save it to my camera roll as an option. So just allow this progress bar to run. And now that I've saved it, and of course it's saved to my CC library, I'm also going to save it to the device by saying that I'm saving it to, of course, simply my device's library right there. Now to take advantage of what I've just done here in Photoshop Mix, I'm going to switch over to Adobe Comp, where I've been working on this project. Now this is the project level, where I would have lots of projects if I've been using lots and lots, but I just have the single project to keep things nice and clean. When I tap on it, this takes me to the page level, although they like to call them documents. So in Comp, a page is a document for some reason, and that's because you really export just the individual pages as you're working. So a project is a collection of documents. Documents really just means pages. Now I'm going to create a new page, so down here in the bottom, here at the project level, I can use a new page by hitting the plus sign. This is going to make a new blank page, and I'm going to use the iPad size to keep things consistent. Now I'm going to say close right away for two reasons. First up, I'm going to tap and hold and just sort the pages so that they're in the proper order. But I'm also going to go to the first page where I'm going to show you the select more than one option. I'm going to select more than one item. So I'm clicking on the large rectangle in the background. By doing so, I get options across the bottom to make selections. Well, out of this menu on the end, I can choose select multiple. Then I can start clicking on other objects to select them. And I didn't select the text. I didn't select any of the text, but I selected the photograph. I selected the 9 graphics in a group. I selected the black objects at the bottom. That's what I selected. There's 7 things selected. Now when I say done, they are all selected, and the bounding box shows that. If I go to any corner or side, I could resize these or move them, but they're very delicate, so I'm not going to demonstrate that. I don't want to have to resize them. I'm going to instead go back to the same button where I can just choose copy. And I've now copied those 7 selected items. That way I can say close, then return to the new page, and paste. Now I have another thumbnail here because the layout of this page is not the same. Right? So I have another thumbnail to work with, and the layout here is a little bit different. So first up, the graphic, well, it is going to be a different graphic. It's going to be the graphic we just saw back in Photoshop Mix. But I'm going to move it here, and I'm going to make it a little bit, give myself a little bit more room for that graphic also by making those icons a bit smaller. I further, right now that I've got that set, I'm noting that I'm going to make this a little bit of a lighter color and maybe go to a red theme instead. But I'm noting that I don't have a rectangle on the edge there. So I'm going to add a new rectangle from the shapes here. And I'm going to resize it. I want to use the same width as the other objects, so I'm just using the Smart Guides for that. I'm not sure of the height until I move it, but I'm going to make it, again, a slightly red color, one from that color theme that matches. I'm just using the preset colors, in fact. But note it covers these other objects, and that's because I added it last. Well, right in the center here, I can arrange items behind other objects until it's exactly in the spot we want them to be in the stacking order. Now it's behind that large rectangle in the background. So note you have a stacking order to work with, of course, to put things together. And I'll just finish up this layout by adding a little bit more placeholder text. I'll add in a second heading here. This is a level 2 heading, for example. And slightly larger. I'll just use the text as is, and I'll use, of course, some more body placeholder text, relying on the Smart Guides and the fact that as I scale this item, notice, of course, that it just fills up with more text as I start to scale it. I'm relying on the Smart Guides to get everything to align together quite nicely, of course. You know, everything on the page is really aligning to other objects that are on the page, and that's pretty exciting. There we go. So the graphic, of course, was copied. I could have just used a new placeholder, of course, as well, right? So back here from import, remember you have placeholder graphics, but I have graphics to work with. So if I select this item, I can then move into this menu and choose, of course, on my device to go and get pictures that are saved to my device, of course. And right there it says photo stream, and that's the picture I saved right there. And you can even see this healing. I can again use the picture that was saved in Mix, or I should also be able to find that in my assets as well, in my library assets. So if I return to the graphics item and then move over to the libraries, Right. I'm of course working with this new library, and there it is. Right, there's the graphic asset from the library that I'm working with. This asset, of course, is available in InDesign and Photoshop and Illustrator on my desktop computer because it's in the very same library. It's in that BOC library, of course. So I'm going to use this item. Well, I ended up with 2 new ones, and I'm just going to delete the original picture, of course, as well, where I can move this item into place, scale it a little bit, and after doing so, remember, a double tap allows me to work on the content inside the frame. So once it's finished, again, allows me to finish the scaling here. I'll just allow it to move the content around in the frame so I could pull it down a little bit here. There we go. So I'm just double tapping on the item to move it down, and all the spot healing and everything I did in Mix is all set here. Now further, on top of that, it's not enough. Okay, and it's really nifty that I can, of course, it's not that it's not enough, but it's really nifty that I can open Mix, take a picture from my photo library, save it back to the library, or save it as an image asset to use here. But there was another option as well that was available to me. And while it's selected, notice down at the bottom, there's round trip editing. So it means that if I select a graphic, I can, oh sorry, this graphic's a library element, so a better example would be to return to the first page. And if I select an asset that I'm working with and I'd like to edit it in Mix, here's what I can do. If I select this item, note that I have an option here just to access the installed touch software, and I can say healing. Now it doesn't give me all of Mix, in that Mix has cropping and the enhancements and all those extra features, but if I want to do something quick, like use the liquify function in Mix, I can do so, or Fix, sorry. I can use the healing function in Fix that I demonstrated, in fact, or I could start creating a cutout in Mix. So I can either use the full software on the graphic, or I could use some of the features of the software in round-trip editing between Comp and Photoshop Mix or Photoshop Fix. So as I close here, I can now start working with these assets and send, of course, this page over to Adobe InDesign to work with, and all those great settings, of course, that we saw earlier. Send to InDesign, send to Photoshop, send to Muse. I can keep working on this item. So I'm working on InDesign right now on the final. I'm working on the real project on my desktop computer. And by doing so, I'm putting together things based on the assets that I started way back with those thumbnail sketches, way back with what I was doing in Adobe Draw, way back with what I was doing in Adobe Comp. Right? All those features are, again, in use here. And again, what I was doing in Adobe Illustrator, too, for that matter. So what I've got is I've got the graphics organized where I wanted them. I've got the finalized colors, right? So I've been using, again, similar but not identical colors to what you saw in Comp. I'm using essentially the same layout, but I've got the real text and the real formatting. I have the real graphics down in the bottom right corner. So the Birds of Canada logo I needed to use, I didn't have available, so I just kind of mocked up. I could have made it available because I had the other graphics available, but I simply have them here now. They were in the mock-up. I knew what they represented, so I have those set. And then of course I also even have the artwork from Illustrator that I started back in Draw and finished in Illustrator, and note that bird drawing is right there on this page along with the other assets, of course. So it's based on, not identical to my mock-up, but I definitely use the mock-up from Comp as a guide to build this page. Now to continue, of course, I've also built a second page. I didn't use the red color from the mock-up. I chose a green color instead, but it's essentially the same layout from the second page with the graphic, although I flipped it over, right? And I just continued working on the layout. The layout's going to evolve, of course, as you're working, but I was definitely using the pages that I was creating back in Comp as a guide to build these 4 pages. Now the project's actually 9 pages, and let's say that I'm not quite finished yet, but I'm looking to have a little bit of review. I'm looking to have what I've worked on so far approved, is what I'd like to have. And before I finish the others, of course, before I finish the other pages, I'm still in the middle of the project here, and I'd like people to be aware of what's happening. Now I could do it traditionally by rendering a PDF, emailing the PDF, and then waiting for feedback. Or maybe, instead of relying on people to have Acrobat and relying on people in front of a computer that's got Acrobat installed, maybe I allow people that are on the go to have a look at what I'm doing. Maybe I allow people on the go with mobile devices like phones and tablets to have a look at what I'm doing. Anyone who's got a web browser can preview what I'm working on, and then I can shut down that preview at any given time. But what we have now in the Creative Suite, or the Creative apps, is we have Publish Online. So it's a setting right up here at the top in InDesign waiting to be used. If you've made a PDF recently in InDesign CC, they recommend that you try this feature every time you make a PDF, which is kind of nice. And of course, I tried the feature and I quite like it. What Publish Online does is it keeps it quite simple. It does allow me to access services like Photoshop or Twitter or so, but I'm really just interested in getting a URL that I could email is what I'm doing. So of course I get to choose a name. I've got the name already set. I'm going to say InDesign Draft for the name. I'm publishing this document with all of its pages, although I could do a page range. I'm interested in these 4 pages. Right? I'm allowing the users an option to download a PDF on their own if they would like. I can turn that off, but I'm allowing it. I only have single pages. I don't have a spread, but I can keep them together as a spread if I'm building something along the lines of a book. If, of course, I have a description or some instructions, I can write that out as well right in that description field. Right. So those are the general settings. If we have a look at advanced, they're just simply showing me a preview of what it looks like. They're talking about the formatting and the resolution. I can modify the resolution and use a higher resolution for the graphics, for example. I'm going to keep it at a standard 96 ppi. I think that's going to work quite nicely. They're rendering the images as, of course, JPEGs. So again, high is pretty good. Some graphics will again render out as GIFs as well. So I'm going to leave things as they are. In fact, I'm going to use those particular settings. If someone makes a PDF, it will use the high quality preset. Well, I'm going to lower that down to smallest file size. So if they make a PDF from the settings, that means, of course, they're getting just a proof. Right, so I've gone through the advanced settings here quite quickly, but there's not a lot to see. Again, there's also, I can use a different image for the cover thumbnail, but I'm going to use the first page. That looks quite nice, in fact. I'm going to say preview, or sorry, publish right here. And it's now going about the Publish Online feature. When it's finished, I'll get an idea of what we've just built. Now what it's doing is rendering it into a format that will display in a web browser is what it's doing. So it will display in any web browser whatsoever. So if someone has a web browser on a mobile device, any mobile device, they can choose to look at it, or any browser that they're going to have on a desktop computer they could use as well. So I can say view document, and I'm definitely going to, but notice they're giving me sharing options where I could make a Facebook post or a Twitter post, of course, or even just jump ahead to an email. I like to manually email things because I use web-based mail, so I would just copy this URL so I could then make an email on my own and use that URL and send it out to whoever I like, or I could even text it to someone for that matter. But I've copied it so I can work from that point of view, but to see what everyone will see, I'm going to say view document. And by choosing this view document, it's going to launch my web browser. It's what it's going to do. Okay. And in my web browser, it's going to render that page. Actually, I clicked it twice, so it's rendering it twice. Let's just go to the first load. There we go. Down at the bottom, I'm going to have an interface not unlike Acrobat, in fact. So an interface not unlike Acrobat will be built here at the bottom as soon as it finishes up. But note I have this nice, pleasing gray background. I can switch to, of course, a thumbnail view to see all of the pages at the same time. There's all 4 pages, and I can turn that off. I can zoom in or zoom out. I further can use a full screen option, or I can continue to say share, allowing someone else to share with those same settings we saw before. Further, I have an option to download the PDF right there based on that smallest file size proof setting. It's not a final, it would be a proof no matter what, but we can make a PDF. I allowed that. Remember, you can disable that setting, of course, as well. But that option's available. And again, I haven't shown you, but I can just preview through the pages by going right and left with these arrows on either side to preview. So I can allow the client to look at the layout that I'm putting together in, of course, any web browser they're working with, and not have to make and send a PDF, and see all the options we have for, again, just looking and viewing the document, of course. Now let's close that up, and specifically right here it also says publish online, right? So publish online dashboard. Here's where I control, again, the elements that I've set to publish online. This is all part of your account online at the Adobe website. So this item, specifically when it's loading, what it's going to do is it's just going to show you all the documents that I have open that I've been sharing. So here's the document I just shared 2 minutes ago. Here's one from May 24th, quite a while ago. But here it is. Now again, here are the options that I've got. It's again allowing me to continue to share it with new people, of course, and it has access to the URL. But of course, here's a trash can allowing me to delete it, to get rid of it, so it's not available to somebody else, of course. If I switch over to analytics, I can start seeing who looked at it and when. That's a new feature, of course. But importantly, here's the thing I want to show you. I love this part. If I go to this URL tag icon, a new window opens up where they build a preview. And the preview again is 525 pixels by 371, a fairly standard image size. But I can increase the size, of course, to maybe 650 by 460 or smaller. You can even use custom sizes. It starts on page 1, but what they're doing is they're showing a preview of a web graphic you can make, a preview of a slideshow that you can make, a widget for the web. Down here, this is an iframe. And if I take this HTML code and make it available to any site that uses iframe, and that's almost any site, that's HTML5, I can use this embed code feature in Muse or in Dreamweaver, or simply anyone who's just working and putting together a page can use this. Or again, you can use it in WordPress. It's just anything that supports iframe. You can copy this, and then the appearance up here that you see of being able to switch between the pages in a smaller thumbnail view and embed it into a different page is available, as well as a slideshow graphic. So they're giving you that option here, which I think is pretty terrific also. And those are the options they're allowing me to work with. So if I'm finished with this particular picture and I no longer want it in here, of course that means I can just use the trash can to delete it, and now it's no longer available for anybody to have a look at. That URL no longer works if they try it. But simply this one still continues to work. To wrap up entirely, I'll just show you that on an iPad, if I have access to this URL, I of course am going to be able to see the very same thing on the browser in the iPad. So I switched back to my iPad right here, and I'm just going to launch Safari on my iPad. Now I've been using Apple devices because that's what I own. I've been using Windows 10 for the Creative Cloud services, of course, on my desktop computer or on my laptop. But as far as my mobile devices go, I've been using the iPad and my iPhone. However, if I had Android devices, this all would have worked the same. Just got Safari open in the default web browser. Now, I didn't show you the email, but again, if I send an email to myself with that URL, or an email to anybody with the URL, anyone with access to that URL that you send it to can paste it in, or even just click the URL to go to that specific page to be able to view and preview, of course, what I was building in InDesign. So here it is, all the same as you saw in the desktop web browser. So this is the mobile web browser on my iPad. I'm able to switch between the pages, of course, in the same way to see each of the pages or so, and I've got the options down at the bottom of the screen to, of course, work with these elements. You see, I could reshare this object and have access to those features. It's not quite the same as what I had in Google Chrome on my desktop computer, but it's again for previewing purposes and to be able to see the layout and again create feedback and everything. It's absolutely perfect as far as being able to see this item on a mobile device. So very happy with the results of being able to preview what I'm currently just working on in InDesign at a high quality on, again, just simply any mobile device I would like, quickly and easily, or not just any mobile device, any mobile device at all. I hope this was helpful and informative, and I hope I gave you a pretty good tour through the touch apps and how they will sync in to, of course, your Creative Cloud apps. And hopefully, again, we can put these together and start working with these settings. Thanks so much.